Now we're going to move to the night scene, and for this setup you can see the tonality of the room, just looking at the color panels there, jumps dramatically. We go from this white, grey, slightly cream, if you like, in there, to a really rich orange tone with elements of almost green. It's a bluey green coming in through the windows, and that's our exterior moonlight in all of these windows just here. The direction of that feels like, just looking at the window there, like it's coming in that way, but none of the others seem to have that same direct feel. It's just that one. Apart from that, we have lots of practicals in shot. Just call all of these out. You've got lots of candles at the tables. You've got these big kind of open fire pit type things. More candles, more candles, more candles all the way around the room. And that's great because it means you can justify any light on people's faces because you've got all of those practicals in shot. We've got a big chandelier in shot just here, and that chandelier is motivating the light coming down onto our dancers in the front, the royal family at the back just there, all of that motivated by having the chandelier at the top just here. And as we know from the behind the scenes shot, this is actually the huge lighting grid overhead, just flagged off down the sides and all gridded so that it's a very controlled light source. And then that's coming down over the whole room, giving everything level. But we do still have definition on the sides of the faces just here. So we can surmise that the lighting grid probably marries up roughly with the pattern on the floor, I would say. Because if that's the case, having it coming in around there, you would get that light hitting their faces, but you wouldn't have it eking around the sides on the front. And also, let's disable that color palette for a moment. You got these people right in the foreground who are all completely in silhouette, just giving a bit of interest to the foreground, sort of out of focus shapes, making it seem lively. We've got shadows which give away the direction of the lighting quite nicely for us. They're all basically 12 o'clock right underneath them because all of that light's coming straight down, helping to just give that room tone, because there's no way on earth this room would be that bright just with candlelight. Even that said, the candles do seem to be playing on the walls and some of the tables. We've got all of these lovely reflections in the table just here and on the floor coming through in this area just here, and we'll get more later on when we start to move around through the different scenes. So it's interesting to see that spread. We have got, just over on the side here, a really bright highlight on the side of this guy, which makes me think there's another light source, probably another frame or something off to the side here, and that is just beaming out in this direction, perhaps catching the backs of these dancers. Don't see anything so equivalent just here. We have got some light definitely catching like the chair and things just there, and there seems to be a bit of a shadow line coming across there, so there's something playing here. But with this kind of setup, you need a lot of light to make it work, and there's going to be many different sources. But that overhead softbox, though, is definitely what is pulling this all together. There are lots of layers going on. There's a lot of lighting that you would need to think about to make this scene work. But without that, you're just going to have super bright spots and super dark areas, and you won't get that gradual fall off between the two of them. It's probably the number one thing I find when people are approaching this kind of dark-ish night scene is that they don't light it enough. So having a base level to work with, working out where you need your highlights to sit and where you need your shadows to sit, and then kind of massaging the areas in between so that it all sits nicely and plays together. It's very hard to think of things like that, and it never quite looks right in real life. You kind of have to trust your light meter on this, learn what the ratios should be, and give a little bit more light than perhaps you would imagine, and just make sure you are edging people on the offside so that you get those hard contrasts a little bit more. Hopping on to this behind the scenes shot, you see you've got the lighting grid up there, you've got all of the candles lit, so it is a night scene. Whether or not it is the same night scene, I'm not quite sure. Background looks a bit different, but that's just probably because of the color grade. They've gone with a slightly different tone than what this probably phone has captured. It's never going to do the same job as the Panavision camera they were shooting on. Jumping from here to the reverse shot, obviously the thing that we're missing in between those two is the blue that was coming in through the windows. But apart from that, we got a similar story. People in the back are falling off to shadow quite substantially, but that's fine, that's good. We still have the interest coming up from those open fires in the back, just there. All of this happening down here. So that stops it from being just a sea of black in the back. It gradually falls up the walls. The top of this set, remember, doesn't exist, so that's probably been reconstructed from about there onwards. Next, we jump behind the table, and going to disable that actually, because we've got a really nice contrast ratio here. Everything is working on this shot. We've got good definition on our subjects. We can see enough of his eye that we're getting a bit of a catch light. The light has got to be at a frame above them just here. Whether or not it is the big frame that we saw just playing on them from there, or whether that's another light that's been bought in specifically for these guys for this shot, I'm not too sure. I wouldn't have imagined that they would catch as much from that grid on the tops of their heads as they are just here. So maybe that is another frame just slightly over the top, and it is coming quite a way back on them. This has got to be something from the side just there, because it's getting right down onto his neck there. Not so much on this guy, just on his shoulders. All those highlights there. But I love that. And we've got all of these bokeh balls just in the background, creating interest with the dancers. Focuses on them. Gradually the camera moves through. So let's take that out. Move on to the next one. Jumping around, everyone goes to much flatter faces just here. It is motivated. So you do have all of these candles right on the edge of exposure. You can see in our little color picker just here, it's mostly brown tones, orangey brown, a little bit of green coming in because you've got the leaves and the dresses just there, and also the windows and chair just there. Got a lot of light coming from the right hand side, and that fits with what we just saw actually, with these two guys sitting and looking at each other. Coming in that way, Queen's got a really good spread across her, and again she does as well. Now this is all still a little bit toppy because you can see under her chin just there she's got her head over to the side. All of this is down. In this 3-shot we are feeling like we're losing a little bit of the definition on everyone. We've got very flat feel on all these faces. Feels just like a very big soft sauce again, flat onto them. Interestingly, the light is, as we've established, coming from this direction just here, but even though that is the established direction with this side being ever so slightly down, in the next clip it's flipped. So we have the light coming in this way, going counter to that, and then we have a substantial change because now this is all down and under her chin's really down. Now having the catch light in her eyes just there is something we haven't seen in this scene so far. If we jump back, we're actually going to find that in all of these close-up shots, we aren't really able to define the catch light as clearly. Feels like there's something off to the right. I can definitely get a vibe of something off here, slightly high up, getting into her eye just there. But now it's on the other side. It's on this side just here. And if I had to guess, I'd say that's another big frame. Not as high as before, actually. So that's coming down like that. And then across, that is casting straight towards her. And we're getting it right underneath her chin. In fact, this line just here kind of tells all. So you got that coming straight across there. We're not getting any shadowing down like this from her chin. So yeah, I'd say that's very flat onto her, which is completely different from the previous shots. And we definitely got downside on this side now. Yeah. And certainly on her as well, under her chin, down her neck, on her hair. All of that's down. Nice light, beautiful light, but it's certainly different from the previous shots. Next clip. Oh yeah, then we're just shifting focus so we can see more of what's going on her face, but I don't think there's anything really worth saying. You can see in her neck actually there where the shadow line is coming in. And that's pretty flat on again, but it does feel definitely motivated from the right hand side of frame now. And this could be either, but it was very similar to that first shot with the guys that we saw. Different things going on just here. We've got these two guys stepping up and very hot edge on this side for both of them, which makes me think there's something just off frame here, maybe an 8x8 at a distance, maybe 16 feet back. So you've got an 8x8, 16 feet back, and that's keying them with that edge. And then we've got something much softer on this side. So they're kind of lit from both sides, but that's wrapping a little bit more on both of them just here. And they're just left with that dark area in between the two, like that. So I'd say a much softer source, and maybe say 12 by closer up. And the fall off isn't that great between the two of them, but they're pretty close together. So yeah, I get a 12 by on this side. So 12 by 12 on there, wrapping around, probably coming in, yeah, just behind where everyone is just here. So they've moved around the set a bit, and we've got quite a lot of atmosphere in the background as well, but we've still got those lovely, lively lamps going on, which help to bring it all to life. One of the things that I've enjoyed particularly about this scene is being able to see how a DP approaches the same room at different times of day, and how you position within the world that you're creating what your motivating sources are. Obviously everything here is firelight of some description, apart from daylight and moonlight and anything magical. So we're establishing sort of a green tone to moonlight almost in the background, which sits as a really strong contrast to those orange tones all throughout. But it's something which knits in a lot with the characters. So their cloaks are green, the chairs have green cushions, there's lots of green elements, rich, deep greens within their family crest, I believe. So it's definitely something which is driving the character as well as driving the motivation for the look of the scene, and just comparing those two situations where you've got a different vibe, where you've got a different motivation for the light source, and how that affects the way that the characters look and where everything sits. And throughout this you've got a very similar setup of characters. So here you've got faces, you can see them all lined up on the left and the right, and you can see what the light is doing. Here you've got the same thing, face on the left and the right, you can see what they're doing. The two scenes have very similar contrast in some areas, so you've got really deep blacks on the left-hand side there, and just on these guys here. And then you've got a similar thing, you've got very deep blacks, but it's the way that the stonework changes, it's the way that the reflections shift, so they're no longer in the same positions, which changes the vibe of the whole space. It's the way that the light wraps or doesn't wrap around the characters, and that is also driven by the story and what they're trying to evoke. I love this frame, it's probably my favorite out of the whole set just here, because we've got that really rich, deep shadow on both of them, and this light still feels well motivated with all of the sources that we've seen in the shot. Some of the others I feel like come across a little bit flat, and that's just flat for my taste. Like if I'm looking at a face and I was lighting a face, I would want it to have a bit more shape than that, but for this setup you're not going to achieve that really, unless you go with a much harder source. For this, where we've got the big setups of people moving, being able to just approach that and light it, the amount of light that you need is stupendous. So in setups like this, where they've got the big grid at the top, they're probably filling it with sky panels, and they're able to change the color temperature in that. They're able to add in, with their other sky panels, lots of flickering light, so varying the output of the light and the color temperature of the light, and keeping the light moving so that it, motivated by the firelights, can really help to bed in the idea that it is being lit with these lively flames. And this is something which has become much easier over the past few years. Traditionally, to achieve this kind of look, you'd be using tungsten, and you'd require all kinds of really clever dimming boxes to vary the light, and you'd have to have several different lights. You'd have to have them gelled so that you could get that shift and movement in the light to make it seem random like a fire. It would require a lot more power to do that. You've got to really know what you're doing to get those enormous tungsten lights up and getting the scene working like that. But now with the LED technology, you can just get that set up. You can have it moving around. You can switch it so that you're doing the night scene, and then you leave the same lighting grid up, turn it over to 5600, change the way that the light is moving so it's more static, and then you can do the same scene without having to rewire tons of things. Just switch it on the board, all the lights change, and you get the look that you need much more quickly. And when they're working in sets like this, it allows them to get many different looks really fast. So the LED lighting technology has definitely come on leaps and bounds, and seeing it in use on this kind of set, where traditionally you had much bigger lighting instruments at play, is interesting, because this wouldn't have been achievable. Even though at the lower end of the market it's scaled right down, you don't get the same power output, you can still start to experiment with it and get those different looks very, very fast. A lot of these effects with the fire you can dial into even the cheapest LED lights now. So it's a way of creating a lively, moving frame which feels grounded, as long as you've got something to motivate it, and you've always got to be careful when using real live flames, real live candles. But it's easy to use those as your motivating source, and then push in a bit of light for close-ups. For a wide shot like this, forget about it, but for close-ups, it's really interesting. I hope you've liked this content. If you have, please subscribe. We're breaking down all kinds of cinematography shoots that we do, commercial shoots, and also things that catch my eye, like the scenes in The Witcher. We're going to be doing more of these and other TV shows. So if you have something you'd like a breakdown of, drop it down below and we'll check it out.